Okay, next question. What has been the response of the Black community to you? How have you addressed the negative and the positive? Are you trying to build or lead a movement of Black Americans to embrace your ideas? Okay, well, I'm not a natural movement builder, but I'm also not against building a movement. So, addressing the first question, what has been the response of the Black community to my work? Well, obviously, it's been mixed. I think some people have the impression that I get unanimous criticism and opprobrium from the Black community. And I understand where they get this impression from. I mean, the Black elite Twitter checkmark crowd has definitely called me every name in the book. But I think that actually biases the perception of how I've been received in a way that doesn't reflect reality, because the criticism I get, much of it occurs in public where you, dear listener, can see it. But the praise I get much more often occurs in private. It occurs in my inbox. It occurs with people I know from my actual life coming up to me and saying that they like my work. This happens pretty regularly, and that's the kind of thing that is invisible from the outside. So I think the criticism is likely to be public, whereas the praise I get from people in the Black community is more likely to be private. I mean, that said, it's really hard to gauge, even from my own perspective, what the ratio of praise to criticism is. I mean, there's another thing biasing, I think, people's perception of how I'm received by Black people, which is this constant misimpression that never seems to die, that Black people, the Black community, is as a whole woke and or very far left, right? I mean, this is an understandable impression. Black people on the whole vote Democrat, something like 85 or 90% usually. But, the typical or median Black American is a Biden Democrat that doesn't want any diminishment of the police in their own neighborhood. So really just absorb that fact, and it becomes easier to see how I get, from my perspective, maybe as much praise as I get criticism from Black people. There's this constant sort of idea from people in the commentariat that, Black people all have sort of Black Lives Matter's take on the police, for instance. That's just sort of one litmus test. And when you actually poll Black Americans on, what we believe on this issue, you get something like 60% of Black people say they want the same amount of police presence in their neighborhood. Roughly 20% say they want less, and roughly 20% say they want more. So that puts at most 1 in 5 Black Americans aligned with Black Lives Matter's orientation towards the police or the presence of police. Now, obviously, far more than 1 in 5 Black people would say they support Black Lives Matter in the abstract. But when you drill down on specific policies, Black Americans are not on the whole woke. And this is another area in which it's always useful to remind people that Twitter is not the real world. So my sense is there are a lot of people out there that think I've been quote unquote rejected by the Black community, and that's that really couldn't be further from the truth of my experience. So that's what I would say about that. I mean, there's another asymmetry, I guess, to talk about here, which is who is buying all of these anti-racist books, right? Who's buying Ibram Kendi and Coates? Who's making these books bestsellers? Is it that only Black people are buying these books and that's how they're ending up atop the New York Times bestseller list for dozens of weeks in a row? I mean, it'd be tough if only 13% of the population are buying your books to even make the bestsellers list for 1 week. I mean, my point here is that, the kind of person who levels the accusation of Uncle Tom or a sellout at someone like me, and, with the implication that white people are the only people that like what that are buying what I'm selling. First of all, it isn't true. And secondly, they would never level the same accusation at a Coates or a Kendi. even if most of the people buying those books are also white. It was very interesting to be a person who thinks the way I do at Columbia, in a hyper progressive space racially, and to be known as a writer that had all the wrong opinions on race. Someone that was against affirmative action, and someone that didn't think fuck the police was the proper attitude to have towards law and order. Like there's a sense that this attack I will get hit with many times from people on the internet, which is, you're just saying that because you want white people to like you, right? You're just saying that because you crave the approval of the white community. And, this I've always thought was an especially ironic line of attack, because in where I'm from, progressive suburb of New York, and went to college at an Ivy League school, what would have gotten me the approval of white people would have been to be as woke as possible, right? If I wanted white people to like me, I should have been woke rather than anti-woke. I mean, one time I matched with a girl on Tinder at Columbia, and I was excited to go on a date with her because we had a lot of mutual interests. We liked the same music and blah, blah, blah. She read one of my pieces and canceled the date. And I was obviously not very happy, but this kind of thing happens. And so that's just giving you a little taste of what the social incentives are at these kinds of places, right? If I wanted to sell out, I could not have done anything better than to parrot the Kendi and Coates anti-racist line. So it's always been, to me, especially funny to get the critique level that clearly you're just saying this because you want to be loved by white people. It's like, it's pretty hilarious.